Today, 5 science fiction hidden gems that you almost never hear about anymore. First up is Starman's Son 2250 AD by Andre Norton, published in 1952. I would have never come across this gem of post-apocalyptic fiction if it weren't for a clerk at a used bookstore who recommended it to me a few decades ago. I was buying this one, and they told me that Starman's Son was better, and I agree. It's carried 2 titles, Starman's Son and Daybreak 2250 AD. It's important to note that this was published in 1952. This was written less than a decade after the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is a seminal post-nuclear war speculative fiction novel. Norton is one of the first to imagine in literature what the world might look like after nuclear holocaust. She delivers a return to basic survival themes, battles with pre-modern weaponry, and mutants or almost humans. The Starmen are the explorers and innovators in this post-apocalyptic world, and teenage main character Fours is desperate to become a Starman. Also fairly novel for its time was the inclusion of a significant character of color. Norton clearly was aware of new developments in race relations in the 1950s and was ahead of her time in this regard, and was mindful of this in her character casting. This is a great SF story for anybody who's ever thought of themselves as an other. While the prose is fairly quirky and pulpy, Norton delivers a solid adventure and a lot more thinking than you might expect for a hero's tale about an angry teenager on a quest. This is readable at any age, and for very young readers, this could maybe even be considered mind-blowing. The Affirmation by Christopher Priest, published in 1981, I believe the best one-word description of Priest's writing is elegant. Take this opening line. I once thought the empathetic nature of words ensured truth. If I could find the right words, then with the proper will, I could by assertion write all that was true. I have since learned that words are only as valid as the mind that chooses them, so that of essence, all prose is a form of deception. To choose too carefully is to become pedantic. That sets the tone for main character Peter Sinclair, narrating his story to present his autobiography, constantly summoning his memory and trying to find the precise words to tell his story. This starts out as a way to find value in his life, or at least some sort of meaning among the current trauma that he experiences. In his process of writing, Sinclair is revealing to us that he is unstable, and despite his stated meticulous wordsmithing, he's fictionalizing his life, presenting a character different than what is real. It becomes a bit of a mind trip. For this novel to work, it's gonna depend on the reader wanting to take this ride and to spend some time inside of Sinclair's mind. The story's very introspective, and it's not a thriller by any means. It's also only vaguely science fiction because of a dip into the idea of immortality, and because it's written by an author who is most well known for SF writing, Priest. The reward of the read is the examination that it provokes of the human condition and existence. Distraction by Bruce Sterling, published in 1998. This is a tech thriller from one of the great cyberpunk masterminds of the past several decades. This little gem is not as well known and celebrated as his other works, Matrix and this compilation with Mozart and Mirror Shades. 2 phenomenal literary masterpieces. The main character in this one is Oscar, a master manipulator politico navigating a terribly dystopian United States. Equally a spin-the-truth machine is the seedy politician that he helps to get into office. At least, unlike Oscar, the senator isn't the son of a drug lord or the product of a cloning experiment. This is important because the country is basically run through emergency committees. We have new Cold Wars, environmental catastrophe, mass unemployment, class warfare, and some very problematic bioengineering. If for no other reason, read this for the ideas per second accomplishment that Sterling promises. Speaking of compilations of masterful work, how about The Voices of Time and Other Stories by J.G. Ballard, published in 1962? This compilation of Ballard's ingenious short fiction is a hidden gem that should not be so hidden. One thing that I love about Ballard is that beyond the prose always being strong and smooth, there's also always a sleight of hand working things into the narrative that can only come from a brilliant mind such as his. For me, the biggest gem in the book is the overloaded man. In this story, protagonist Faulkner may just be a genius because of his gift to see beyond the superficial nature of any object. This is an especially weird talent or perception when applied to everyday things like a cabinet door. Seeing it in its deeper parts and as a geometric form, he's nearly lost the sense of what its basic function is. Inherent in this is an ability to sort of turn off much of the world. Will this work on people too? What about his wife? The story becomes beautiful, ugly, and chilling at the same time. I may have forgotten about this story and this novel altogether if it hadn't been for my recent reading of Adam Roberts' The Thing Itself, and that novel's leaning into Kant's theory of transcendental idealism. It reminded me vaguely of the concept in The Overloaded Man. Other favorite stories in this compilation are Sound Sweep and The Voices of Time. Soldiers of Paradise by Paul Park, published in 1987. This is the first book in Park's Starbridge Chronicles trilogy, of which I've only read the first book. The world presented is split between civilized and primitive. In the civilized world, the social structure is caste-based and religion-led. The primitives are not organized, and basically they've decided to go off into the wilderness and live off the land, and they appreciate music and other more simple art. Because of the tech superiority of the civilized, the oppression of the primitives is pretty much guaranteed. This is a complex and complicated read, but it's well worth it. The prose is fascinating, the world building is vast, it's somewhat fantastical, and at times it's difficult to get a footing into, but some of the interesting elements are seasons that last for generations, elements of the supernatural, and a culture that, while it looks very alien to what we may be familiar with, is rich in symbolism. Thank you for watching. I'm Michael Everts, and this is Fit to be Read.